قل هذه سبيلي أدعو إلى الله على بصيرة أنا ومن اتبعني وسبحان الله وما أنا من المشركين.
بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. إن الحمد لله نحمده ونستعينه ونستهديه ونستغفره ونعوذ بالله من شرور أنفسنا ومن سيئات أعمالنا. من يهده الله فلا مضل له ومن يضلل فلا هادي له، وأشهد أن لا إله إلا الله وحده لا شريك له، وأشهد أن محمدا عبده ورسوله صلى الله عليه وعلى آله وأصحابه وسلم تسليما كثيرا. أما بعد. An important point. Allah said He created us for His worship. He commanded us to worship Him. Now, why isn't everyone worshiping Him then? This applies to dozens or hundreds of verses in the Quran and the Hadith. For example, in this verse, Allah said He created us. We got that part. He created us. But then He said to worship Him. He created us. We know that order is we're here. That means He created us. But why isn't everyone worshiping? That's the problem. He ordered we be created. We are. He ordered we worship Him. Not everyone's worshiping Him. Here you need to understand there's something called irada shar'iyya, taklif faqat. Irada shar'iyya, at-taklif faqat. What do we mean? In order to understand the verse and similar verses, you have to understand there's two forms of wills for Allah. Two forms of mashi'ah. Will is mashi'ah. Two forms of mashi'ah of Allah. There's number one, irada kawniyya. And number two, irada shar'iyya. Number one, irada kawniyya. In English, I believe the good interpretation of the word kawniyya would probably be universal will. Now this will, it's mashi'ah. It's the will of Allah in which His order is carried out. That's A. B. This is the type of will of Allah that we say whatever will Allah wills happens and whatever He does not will not happen. C. This is a will like death, a mashi'ah like death, like health, like sickness. Everyone's equal in these. Muslim, kafir, righteous, not righteous. They're kawniyya, they're universal will. Example, what happened to Ayub? أَنِّي مَسَّنِيَ الضُّرُّ وَأَنْتَ أَرْحَمُ الرَّاحِمِينَ. Surah Al-Anbiya, he said, he cried to his Lord, verily, distress has seized me. It seizes the messengers and it seizes other people. Alayhi salam, Ayub alayhi salam, it seized him and it seizes other people. Hardship afflicted his messenger. إنما أمره إذا أراد شيئا أن يقول له كن فيكون. This is another example of this. General order of Allah, be and it's done, falls under this will, the first one. وَكَانَ أَمْرُ اللَّهِ مَفْعُولًا. And this summarizes this will. This is another example. The commandment of Allah is always executed. This will is a general will that encompasses everything in the universe, good and bad. Encompasses everything in the universe, good and bad. The general universal will. His order is carried out in this, but it will not necessarily mean that He likes it. It is not necessary that all actions of His creations are liked by Him. Rather, you know, many of their acts are disliked by Allah. But He willed for them to pass. They're acts that are disliked by Allah, but Allah willed for them to pass. This is irada kawniyya or universal will. For example, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala created the shaitan. I was given a lecture once and they asked someone before me who spoke, they asked, did Allah create the shaitan? And he didn't know this stuff, so he said, no. Allah created the shaitan, He disliked him. He created the kafirin and He disliked them. Inna Allah la yuhibbul kafirin. In Surah Al-Zumar. He created, فَإِنَّ اللَّهَ لَا يُحِبُّ الْكَافِرِينَ in Surah Al-Zumar. He created the kuffar. He's not pleased with kufr. وَلَا يَرْضَى لِعِبَادِ الْكُفْرِ. Not everything Allah permits to exist or He creates means that He loves. Repeat, so you get it right. This will is the universal will, al-kawniyya. It's that not everything Allah permits to exist and He creates necessarily means that He loves it. Under this will, Allah may decree to pass things which He does not command His slaves to follow, like kufr, disobedience. Orders carried out in this will, this type of will by Allah, doesn't necessarily mean He likes it. Then we have the second one. Al-irada al-shar'iyya. And I believe possibly the most accurate term for that would possibly be judicial will. The will of the will of Allah which is in accordance to Allah's legislation. B, it is related to what Allah likes. C, this will may take place, may not. This mashia of Allah may take place, may not. Look at the verse. وَإِذَا فَعَلُوا فَاحِشَةً قَالُوا وَجَدْنَا عَلَيْهَا آبَاءَنَا وَاللَّهُ أَمَرَنَا بِهَا قُلْ إِنَّ اللَّهَ لَا يَأْمُرُ بِالْفَحْشَاءِ. When they commit a fahisha, they said, we found our fathers doing it. Allah did not command fahisha or sins. It's under the universal mashia. Under the Shari'iyya mashia, He wants you to follow the straight path. يريد الله ليبين لكم ويهديكم سنن الذين من قبلكم ويتوب عليكم والله عليم حكيم. Allah wants to guide you. This is an example of this one. Allah wants to guide you, to forgive you. That's Shari'iyya. This is the will that's Shari'iyya. He wills this will, He likes it, but not everyone does it. وَأَحْسِنُوا إِنَّ اللَّهَ يُحِبُّ الْمُحْسِنِينَ. He commands us to be righteous. He wants everyone to be righteous, but not everyone does this will of Allah. Some respond to this will of Allah that He ordered and commanded, others don't. You understand? For example, the acts of obedience of a believer, they're loved by Allah. Your ibadah, your prayer at night, your fard, your sunnah, your deeds. And they're passed under His universal will, kawniyya, and they are passed by His judicial will. Both of them apply. So in the case of an obedient believer, inshallah, in our case, inshallah, our tawheed, our iman, both wills apply. The shar'iyya and the kawniyya. Allah passed it as a universal will, and we accepted that. That would be the judicial will when we accepted that. Both wills apply to the obedience of a righteous believer. A non-believer, Allah likes for him to believe. That's what? Shar'iyya, yes, judicial will. But it doesn't necessarily have to happen. And it doesn't happen because he's a kafir. Had it been universal will, it's going to happen. Most definitely, it's going to happen. Like creating us. Judicial will doesn't necessarily have to happen. Understood? Basically, under al-irada al-shar'iyya, the judicial will, it's not necessary that His commands will be executed, carried out, or followed. And those are the ones that are like to Allah. Those are the wills that are like to Allah from us. Here in the verse, لِيَعْبُدُونَ وَمَا خَلَقْتُ الْجِنَّ وَالْإِنسَ إِلَّا لِيَعْبُدُونَ, Allah orders to do ibadah to Him, meaning to be Muslim, to win the test in this life. Now take it as a rule. All orders to do ibadah in the Quran are shar'iyya, are the will that's shar'iyya. The second type of will of Allah that He likes and that He commands people to do. Also, ibadah shar'iyya means it's not the type of will that's necessarily going to be executed. That's why you don't see everybody worshiping Allah or on the Tawheed. Allah likes it. He wants people to do it, but it's not necessarily going to be executed. I believe now the faces, I see that I understand. So in a nutshell, there's two differences between the two wills. I'll give it to you in a nutshell. The first will, the general, universal will. The second one, Shari'iyya, is a specific will. The first universal, Kawniyya, is that Allah creates everything and orders everything, and it's all carried out by His will, because nothing gets in the way of Allah. What He wills happens. He orders that which He likes and that which He does not, and it's always executed. The will, that Shari'iyya, the judicial will, it's what He likes, but does not mean it will be necessarily executed by people. General matters of this universe fall under the Kawniyya, the universal will. A servant's obedience, that's both, like we said, Kawniyya and Shari'iyya. One who's not obedient, rather a fasiq, who does not do his duties or ordains or is a disbeliever, that's Kawniyya. Allah, under Allah's will, it happened. He could have stopped it, but Allah allowed it to happen. That's under the universal. Then if you understand this, when you understand this, you understand Allah. This is like a response to also those who object to Allah and say, why are the problems in the world going on? The Syrians are being killed, or the Palestinians, or we go through hard times, like a lot of the atheists say. Why does Allah see and let this happen and not change it? Because there's two wills of Allah, al-Kawniyya and al-Shar'iyya. And He has sunan on this earth. He has sunan on this earth. Some of them He likes and some of them He does not. And have and understand that, it puts you at peace. But let's go on further to a more narrow explanation of this. Very similar, but a little bit more narrow. In ibadah itself, in ibadah, there's a Shar'iyya and Kawniyya in ibadah. Ibadah kawniyya is submission to Allah. Submission to Allah by force. What He commanded and decreed in creation, and this is the submission that's common over all creation. No one can escape it. Humans, jinn, rocks, trees, sun, moon, all those submit to Allah by force. No one can anyone run away from Allah? Ma'adallah? No one can run away. So everything submits to Allah by force. This is the first one. Allah said, "In kullu man fis samawati wal ardi illa at ar-Rahmani abda." All in the heavens and in the earth will come to Allah on the day of judgment as submissive slaves. In Surah Al-Maryam, "In kullu man fis samawati wal ardi illa at ar-Rahmani abda." This type of servitude covers the believers and non-believers, the humans, non-humans, the righteous and wicked. Everything is forced to submit to Allah. The first type of servitude is not something for which a servant is commanded. There's nothing you're commanded in this. You're not commanded to do this, because this is by force. Nor do you get reward for it in itself. You don't get reward for it in itself because you didn't do nothing. This is by force. The first type of servitude is not something for which a servant is commanded because there's no action. For example, hardships are by force. You didn't do nothing, you got hardship. You must submit to them by force. You don't get reward for them because you didn't do nothing. Muslim gets it, a non-Muslim gets it, animals get it. They're imposed from Allah on you by force. However, if the hardship comes and you're patient and you thank Allah, then that's totally different. Your time of ease, that's from by force. You don't get reward for that in itself. That was given, that was imposed by force on you. If you thank Allah, then that's the next category. Then you get reward for the thanking, but not the ease or the hardship in itself. Now the second one is worship or servitude, ibadah shar'iyya, judicial ibadah. This is the second one. And this is to obey and submit to the laws of Allah. To submit to the laws of Allah. To submit to the commands of Allah. This is particular to those who are obedient to Allah. And those who comply with that which Allah's messengers alayhimus salam came with. وَعِبَادُ الرَّحْمَنِ الَّذِينَ يَمْشُونَ عَلَى الْأَرْضِ هَوْنًا. The believing slaves of Allah who come on this earth and walk in calmness and humility and humbleness. So the previous ibadah of kawniyah, one is not rewarded because it's imposed by force. It's forced. You're forced to submit to Allah in some matters. You did not do nothing to earn it. The second type of ibadah, of servitude, the person is commanded and he will be rewarded and he will be punished, depending on if he does it or he doesn't do it. Why you need to know this ibadah and irada kawniyah and this ibadah and irada shar'iyyah? Why do you need to know this? Allah in the verse, He created us, said He created us. So He said, وَمَا خَلَقْتُ. He created us to worship Him. The creation half of that verse, that's universal. We all see each other, we're created. That's universal, will of Allah happened, we see it. The next part is to worship Him. Had it been universal worship, kawniyah, it would be that everyone you see on this earth is worshiping Allah. Had it been universal will, that means people bowing to statues are worshiping. Because the same way He created you, by force He created you, brought to this earth, you're worshiping also. But that's not kawniyah. Because the second part of the verse, some worship, some don't. Some have associate partners to Allah. The creation part of our خَلَقْتُ الْجِنَّ وَالْإِنسِ is kawniyah. The worship part, لِيَعْبُدُونَ, is shar'iyyah, meaning He ordered them to worship. He didn't create them worshiping. He ordered them to worship. That they have a choice. That's why it's shar'iyyah. He likes it, He ordered it. But unlike the first one, it's not necessarily going to have to happen. Similar to this verse, وَمَا أَرْسَلْنَا مِن رَسُولٍ إِلَّا لِيُطَاعَ بِإِذْنِ اللَّهِ. Every messenger was sent to be followed. And so people can obey him. If you say obedience in this verse is kawniyah, that means everyone on the face of this earth is obedient to Allah. And of course obedient to the messenger, which is obedience to Allah. The reality is some obey, some disobey. That's why it's called shar'iyyah. It's not kawniyah, it's shar'iyyah. He sent the messengers so people can obey Him. He likes it. He ordered it. But it doesn't necessarily have to happen. In our verse, وَمَا خَلَقْتُ الْجِنَّ وَالْإِنسَ إِلَّا لِيَعْبُدُونَ. He created human and jinn to worship Him. Some worship, some don't. Now you know the difference between worship and ibadah. The shar'iyyah and the kawniyah. The will shar'iyyah and kawniyah, and mashi'a shar'iyyah and kawniyah, and the ibadah shar'iyyah and kawniyah. Moving on with the verse. وَمَا خَلَقْتُ الْجِنَّ وَالْإِنسَ إِلَّا لِيَعْبُدُونَ. Lam. The first letter comes, the lam in the first letter, li ya'budun, comes for two things, either shar'iyyah or kawniyah. Lam al-ta'lil, the lam for reason, meaning the reason for their creation is that I created human and jinn for the reason of. That's shar'iyyah. That's the lam we want. Lam of reason, lam al-ta'lil. I created them for that, for worship. But in Arabic, that lam also comes as lam al-sayrura wal-aqiba. Al-sayrura wal-aqiba. The lam of a result. And in this verse, it's not the lam of a result. Because if it was the lam of result, it would mean kawniyah. And it's not kawniyah. If it was this lam, it would mean, here's what the verse would mean. I have created every human and jinn to worship me. And every individual worships me. That's how it would have been. Lam here is lam al-ta'lil of reason. The reason is, which means it's shar'iyyah. It's ibadah shar'iyyah. Not lam al-sayrura wal-aqiba, which means kawniyah, which means the result is that they all worship me. This is ibadah shar'iyya, not kawniyya in this verse. He did the first, he mentioned the first, which is the creation. That's universal. So we can do the second, which is shar'iyya, is worship him. The creation of Allah aspect is kawniyya, universal. Everyone was created by Allah. The worship part of it, the worship part is shar'iyya, meaning he wants us all to do something, which is to worship him. We already mentioned before how traditional acts can be turned into worship by simply changing your niyyah. We mentioned, you remember, if you go to sleep in the daytime, in your purpose of sleep, you just put in your intention that you wanna sleep, so at night time you can wake up for Qiyam al-Layl. That in itself will change that sleep, the time you're sleeping, into ibadah. And you remember we talked about workout. Someone goes and works out, one goes for one reason, both are working out. One goes for one reason, one goes for another reason. One gets reward, one may get sins, and one just doesn't get nothing. So I guess the time is over. We'll continue from here inshallah next week. Jazakumullah khair. Wa sallallahu ala Sayyidina Muhammad wa ala alihi wa sahbihi wa sallam.